Welcome to the news on Ghana News TV. Today, we want to understand the dynamics of the Ghanaian economy. What is the state of the Ghanaian economy? What are we doing right? What are we not doing right? What are the issues with the economy, and what do we do to get them corrected? We'll be joined by Reverend Dr. Worlanyo Mensah, the Executive Director of Center for Greater Impact, to delve into these issues so you are well educated anywhere you are in the country. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's a great honor to have you on the news, on Ghana News TV.
I'm equally privileged having this opportunity.
Doc, let's start off with your overview of the Ghanaian economy.
Well, I think currently the Ghanaian economy is in crisis, and when we look at the basic fundamentals, I think we are losing control of the basic fundamentals, and that will really determines how the welfare of the citizens are. There are two main ways of assessing the performance of an economy. One is book value, and the other one has to do with the market value. The book value has much more of statistics and data. The market value has to do with the improvements in the living standard of the people. So I believe that by and large, policy rate is going up, interest rate going up, inflationary rate very high. Exchange rate, the volatilities in terms of the cedi to the dollar and other international trading currencies are also very weak. And the growth rate is equally declining. So nothing seems to be working. Either the economy is static or it's in a reverse gear.
According to the government, in 2017, we attained the highest growth rate. And then suddenly we are declining. What is accounting for the decline in the growth rate of our country?
Well, I think the government is gradually losing focus on its industrialization drive. I think during the 2017-2018, they have really championed agribusinesses and agro-processing, that's domestication, to be able to industrialize and going beyond aid. So we have the mantra of Ghana beyond aid, African beyond aid, that calls for industrialization and domestication. But somehow government tries to prioritize political ambition more than economic decision. And so gradually, the one district, one factory is no more functioning well. One district, one warehouse is also not functioning well. One village, one dam. I'm yet to count the number of dams that have been constructed across the villages. And so government's own agenda of domesticating the Ghanaian economy has been relegated to the background. I think that is what is causing the high level of inflation, simply because goods and commodities that we have a comparative and absolute advantage to produce in order to stabilize the local economy, we tend to import them into the country. And I think that once you are championing importation, then the economy is more of an import-led economy.
That leads me to talk about the impact of COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war. How significant is this impact on the Ghanaian economy?
Well, the significance of Russia-Ukraine war, the COVID-19 is minimal, to the extent that I don't believe that government should be making noise about those two pandemics. Simply because when you look at the quantum of resources and revenue, or financial assistance that we received because of the COVID issues, is so much to the extent that it's even more than the revenue that we generated domestically. But at the end of the day, there is mismanagement of resources, misapplication of resources, misappropriation of resources, and to a very large extent, there is corruption. And so we are not able to discipline ourselves fiscally. And so there is no fiscal discipline and there is no monitoring discipline. So resources that needs to go into long-term development plans, capital investment are now going to recurrent investment and to also government flagship programs. And most of them that cannot stand the test of time. So I believe that has really contributed to our woes. So if really government wants to overhaul this situation, the government needs to go back to the drawing board and be able to improve upon the economies of scale. And so we'll be able to champion productivity. Because once you have reduced productivity, there's no way that your economy will stabilize.
Bank of Ghana announced an increase in the policy rate. How is that going to impact businesses?
Well, that is insensitive. Well, the timing is wrong. I think that the procedures is also quite cumbersome and quite wrong. Because earlier this year, 2022, the president has alluded to the fact that the COVID-19 and its related issues have affected the local economies. For that matter, businesses have collapsed, and government needs to give businesses some form of stimulus packages to revamp them back or to bring them back to life. So if government, or for that matter the president, has attested the fact that businesses have collapsed, how do you revive businesses or collapse businesses? By increasing the interest rate. So definitely, once the policy rate has been increasing, invariably the interest rate charged by the various commercial banks will also increase. So meaning that the cost of doing business will be high, and invariably that will be transferred to the final consumer. So living standards will continue to fall, cost of living will continue to rise. So meaning there will be more difficulties in the country. Survival will be quite challenging for ordinary citizens. And I believe that the central bank's decision is insensitive, and I think that they need to revisit those decisions and make a better economic decisions. Because even though the policy rate is also a revenue to the state, you don't generate revenue by destroying your own local economy. Because if at the end of the day the businesses, local businesses have collapsed, who is going to work for you to tax them to generate revenue? So at the end of the day, it's like robbing Peter paying Paul. So I believe government should be more sensitive to the plight of Ghanaians.
Let's talk about our debt position. Should we be worried about our debt position as it is now? Because it looks like soon and very soon we might not be able to service our debts.
Well, that is a rhetoric question. I've heard a lot of people making such statements that we owe too much. Ghana does not owe too much. Simply because when you look at even the times of independence during Kwame Nkrumah's time, the quantum of money that we borrow, people even agitate against the government. And that has even led to his overthrow. But what is the value of that money today? I can pay that money on behalf of the state today. You can pay that. Your station can pay that. The secret is that the Western world will tell you you owe too much, because there is no way you can industrialize without going for credit facilities. But then the problem has to do with what do you use the money for? The resources, the monies that we went for, what do you use for? At the end of the day, government, instead of government championing these monies through capital investment, they decided to use it for recurrent expenditures, paying of salaries and wages, seminars, and people traveling, drinking tea and beer. So at the expense of the state. So at the end of the day, look at the COVID money that came, billions of dollars. We are not even able to account for it. Agenda 111, we are now even trying to clear sites. So at the end of the day, there is no accountability. So when there is no accountability, there will be no value for money, and society will suffer for that.
Does that mean that there is some bit of corruption in the dealings of governments over the period?
Not a big corruption. Corruption has taken a center stage of dispensation, and I believe that until we have been able to empower the various anti-corruption agencies like the ROCO, that's formerly Serious Fraud Office, the SRAJ, we're talking about the Auditor General's Department, we're talking about Serious Special Prosecutor's Office and that of the Attorney General's Department. If government succeeded running these institutions down, there is no way we can fight corruption. Quite recently, the Auditor General's Department has been given the authority to surcharge people. But at the end of the day, how many people have been surcharged? The quantum of money that is going into corruption is more than the money we are seeking from the IMF and World Bank. And so I believe that if you are able to discipline ourselves and put accountability measures in place, we make sure that there is probity, there is accountability, there is social justice. Then at the end of the day, there will be equitable distribution of national resources. And that will be able to help us to harness local development.
That is a very important point. But Doc, people are calling for the heads of Dr. Bawumia and the finance minister for leading us into this state of our economy. People believe that they should not be in charge of turning around the economy. What do you say to that?
Well, economic decisions are not an individual decisions, and so we have a cabinet. Cabinet conveys and take a decision on economic policies, and so yes, that's a layman's understanding that once we have a finance minister, once we have a vice president who is in charge of the economic planning, once the economy is not performing to satisfaction, then people calls for their heads. I think it's a right calling, but that is from the layman's point of view. Every single policy, economic policy, is being agreed by the government, and so if government fails to improve upon the living standard of the citizens, then government has failed. Not the vice president has failed, not finance minister has failed, then totally the government has failed. And so it's not an individual issue because it's a collective decision. So economic decisions are always collective decisions. And so if we are calling for the heads of these two icons, then probably we must be championing the exit of the government rather.
Ghana is back at the IMF, 16th time Ghana is going back to the IMF. What is it that we are not doing right?
Well, there is no way that IMF and World Bank will support industrialization, and I don't know why our leaders fails to attest to this fact that the Western world will never develop our economy because they need to ensure that we are dependent economy so that their economy will continue running. And the Western world will collapse. And so the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, and its ally institutions are equally just commercial banks. And so what they do is that they give you credit, and upon giving you the credit, they ensure that you don't use those monies into capital investment. If you use it to set up factories and industries, you expand your economy. You'll be able to solve unemployment rate. And so once you are solving unemployment, you are reducing crime rate. Once you are reducing crime, you realize that the quantum of monies and resources that government use on the security agencies to fight crime is also reducing. And thereby, government have that leisure to be able to develop the economy very well. So, IMF and World Bank will never do that. They will give you resources, they will give you credit facilities with stiff conditionalities. And one of their conditionalities is that you need to increase utilities. And so, gradually, you see that utility tariffs will go up. Water bills, electricity bills, fuel will go up, then transportation will go up. Very soon, talk time will go up. There will be they are going to freeze employment into the public sector. Then they will also try as much as possible not to increase workers' salaries. Even if there will be increment, it will be very minimal. So at the end of the day, the cost of living will be high, but then the salaries of workers will remain the same. So making the living standards very low. I believe that government can do far better. If really we wanted to overturn such a scenario, then we need to pay attention to the homegrown approaches of developing the local economy.
Look, does that mean that the $3 billion that the IMF is supposed to bring into the economy cannot turn around the economy?
Not at all. It's a smart game. The IMF and World Bank, which represent the Bretton Woods institutions, are going to play a smart game on us. What they are going to do is that they will tell us we owe much. And for that matter, we need to use most of those resources, those monies, to settle our debts. But the bigger question is, who do we owe? These are the same institutions that we owe. So it's like they will give you money, then they come back and tell you that you owe them. So they are taking it to pay themselves. So it's just a smart way. That's why I don't advise governments to go into industrialization periodically simply because they wanted to go in for IMF bailout. It's simply not going to work. IMF will never support industrialization. And once you have not been able to industrialize, there is no way your economy can grow. You cannot expand your economy without industries. And IMF will also not support you to go into industrialization. So we need to champion our industrialization, domestication, value addition, increase production, and also being able to improve upon the economies of scale. And that will help us to achieve food security and some appreciable level of national stability.
So does that mean that we need homegrown solutions to this particular woes in which we find ourselves? And what should be these homegrown solutions?
Well, that is very interesting. I had interaction with a lot of media personnel, but I think your focus on development is very much appreciable. And so kudos to you. I believe that when we are looking at the homegrown approaches, the solutions that can turn the economy of Ghana around has to do with 7 thematic areas. One has to do with the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
If you look at the quantum of resources that we use, the money that we use in importing COVID drugs into this country, could have used to empower, support, build the capacity of the various pharmaceutical industries that have the license internationally, even from the World Health Organization, like the MMG Pharmaceuticals and all others. These are first-class international pharmaceutical organizations. Let's expand the pharmaceutical industry by therefore expanding the economy. We create more jobs. We are able to employ more of our teeming youths. Then once they are working, they are able to pay their taxes. Government gets a lot of revenue from these taxes and use it for infrastructure development. That's one. 2, government needs to develop the robust local technology economy. Like as I indicated, what Apostle Safo Kantaka is doing. We could start our own input manufacturing right here in Ghana. Combine harvesters, tractors, water pumping machines, even wheelbarrows. We are importing wheelbarrows into this country. So these are Greek inputs and equipment. We should be able to manufacture them right here. Once you are doing that, you are also helping to expand the technical and vocational education. Because once you do that, then we are giving priority attention to technical and vocational education. Nobody goes to technical schools, campus looking for jobs. So government equally is solving the problem of unemployment. Because once you are solving the problem of unemployment, you are solving the rural-urban migration and its related issues. Because most people migrate from the rural areas to urban centers seeking for white-collar jobs. They are non-existent. So survival of the fittest. Everybody must survive. So people must go into stealing, prostitution, armed robbery, and become drug addicts. And so at the end of the day, then government needs to support the various security agencies with huge sum of money to fight crime. Now, the third one has to do with a very strong technological economy. You realize that these days when you go to the banks, they tell you the system is down. And so we don't have a very strong technological system. And thank God, I think government is championing digitization. And digitization really helps you to transit from a developing country to a developed country. I think that is the pivot, the wheel through which every economy drives on. Because it will enable you to know each Ghanaian, where they are, what they do for a living, so that you'll be able to tax them. So you need a database to reprofile the fortunes of the economy. And that is a key. And so the digitization, we shouldn't take it out of context.
Certainly the Vice President is right.
Exactly, more than right.
Ghana card
exactly.
Above every...
Exactly. With globalization and development, there is no way any economy can survive without digitization. And digitization is purely about gathering data. And so if there is a church and you don't have data about your church members, if assuming somebody is sick, how do you find your way to the person's house? So you really need data, and that data of every Ghanaian is what we call digitization. Digitization is nothing than just data. And so we need that data to reprofile the economy. And I think that we need to invest into that. Now Ghana has also discovered oil, crude oil. So we need to develop the oil economy. We need to develop the oil economy. Various lubricants like the gas oil, gasoline, and the various engine oils, brake fluid, and all of this. We could be producing them right here in Ghana. We have discovered oil, and every day we are exporting this crude oil to outside the country. So at the end of the day, it's another raw material we are exporting. So we are denying the economy of its expansion. So let's develop that sector, petrochemical sector. Let's have factories, let's have companies that will produce various lubricants. So at the end of the day, we create more jobs. we get more revenue, and we are able to solve our deficit in terms of development, infrastructure. Now, we also need to champion agribusinesses and agro-processing. Agribusinesses meaning that we really need to support our people, our indigenes, to go into commercial farming. So if they are going to commercial farming, they need tractors, they need combine harvesters, they need water pumping machines. So why is government not interested in doing all this? Government, some time ago, I think, has started planting for food and jobs, but now it has also been relegated to the background. These are very fantastic policies that turn around economies, irrespective of who is introducing the policy. And so every economy drives on the wheel of agriculture. So how do you encourage people? How do you support your locals to go into farming? You need to provide them these basic incentives to induce them to go into commercial farming. Because once we have not achieved food security, definitely inflation will be going higher, because the food and non-food inflation is always a factor. So the food inflation will be going high, and once the food inflation is going high, you realize that then all other indicators will be going in reverse gear, because definitely once inflation is going high, it will affect exchange rate.
That's true.
It will affect growth rate.
That's true.
It will affect interest rate. So definitely once inflation is going high, Bank of Ghana decided to increase the policy rate. Very soon, various commercial banks will also increase interest rates on loans. So at the end of the day, it's a vicious cycle, and it comes back to affect the local economy. So governments should be able to tackle these various concerns, and above all, the era of globalization. So I believe that we should be able to have a very strong digitized economy, and so we need to invest much more resources into infrastructure development, into the educational sector. Let's have a holistic approach in overhauling the banking and financial sector. We realize that the banking and financial cleanup exercise was a laudable idea. The concept was very good, but the implementation, I think, was mischievous. So at the end of the day, we couldn't achieve the reason for which
the Vice President believes that the banking sector cleanup can also be one of the reasons why we find ourselves in this economic.
But they should have done the assessment. They should have done assessment. They should have done SWOT analysis to know the strengths and the weaknesses of every policy before you roll it out. So does it mean that they just get up and said this is good and without any feasibility work?
No,
they have rolled it out.
The Mahama government has collapsed the sector.
No, I think that the banking and financial sector cleanup exercise hasn't started with MPP government. It started way back from Professor Mills' time. Professor Mills realized that most of the financial institutions were not complying with ethical standards. They have problems with corporate governance issues, problems with money laundering, and so they were not living to the core mandate for which they have been licensed. So there is a need for us to sanitize the system, and I believe that has been the rationale. But John Mahama fails to implement that.
He's saying that by the end of 2024, he's going to turn around the economy and win the election for the New Patriotic Party, and that the NDC should not be happy about what is happening. What do you say about that? The
priority of the president must not be winning the next election. It must be improving upon the living standard of the citizens. You'll be given 8 years. Almost 6 years is gone. You have 2 years to retire. And so if 6 years you are not able to improve upon systems, what assurance do you have for 2 years? So I believe it's a political talk. And government, and for that matter, the president shouldn't be pressured on responding to pertinent issues, but it should focus much more on improving upon the economic policies that will really helps us to improve upon the living standard of Ghanaians.
The prices of goods and services are on the increase daily. What is your advice to the ordinary Ghanaian to be able to brace up for this kind of situation?
Well, life is lead forward but understood backwards, and I believe that there is a problem I have with we Ghanaians. We put all our ambitions, our purposes, our targets, our aspirations, our dreams on political parties. It shouldn't be so. There is nothing wrong belonging to a political party, But if you don't plan your life, no party that is in power, you are likely to fail. So it calls for individual planning, personal planning. And I believe that politicians should equally start educating the populace. And politicians too is also afraid that when the populace get the right informations, it will be very difficult for them to get jobs. Because some people have made politics as their main source of income. And so at the end of the day, they play them on the mindset of citizens. What I would like to tell Ghanaians is that when you were born, you were not born into any political party. You were born as an individual. Plan your life. Plan what you want to do, what business you want to write, what school you want to go, what investment you want to start, and be determined. Once you are determined, irrespective of which party is in government, you still don't find yourself wanting. Because I know people who are NDC and they are making it during MPP time. I know people who are MPP during NDC time, they succeeded. So it doesn't matter which party is in government. Once you plan your life well, you are likely to succeed.
Any advice for government?
Well, government needs to think about the welfare of the citizens, and also president needs to pay more attention on domestic economy. And I believe that the president is known internationally than Ghana, and that may be a recipe for disaster, because living standards are falling, cost of living is rising, and that may create rooms for apathy, that may create room for chaos. And so let's try as much as possible to support the agriculture sector so that we'll be able to achieve food security. If once we have been able to achieve food security, you realize everybody's at peace. Because once people are not at peace, they are subject to violence. And so I urge the governments to do the needful by paying attention to what Ghanaians are saying. Well, definitely, what Ghanaians are saying, NDC may also be saying that, other parties may also be saying that. So if you are condemning NDC, meaning at least 50% of Ghanaians, you are condemning them. How do you want them to survive? So once you have been elected as a president, you are no longer a full member of MPP or a full member of NDC. You are now a president of the state, of the country. So I want the president to take the bull by the horn, do assessment for the performance of his ministers. Most of them are performing woefully inadequate, and so they need not to be reshuffled. Some just needs to be sacked, because I believe that they were not living to expectations, and most of them were championing their personal ambition than even the vision of the president.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Worlanyo Mensah. Before we go, any final words?
I believe that we are developing a very strong religious economy. A government should see the religious bodies as partners for development and be able to come together and develop policies and programs. So churches should start going into the petrochemical sector, agribusinesses, agro-processing. Churches should start setting up manufacturing companies, so that when people come to church and they close, they will not be loitering around looking for jobs. So at the end of the day, if you are able to champion this model, creating a very strong religious economy, I think it's really going to help us to overcome our economic predicaments and really going to stabilize the local economy for us. So churches and various religious organizations should be seen as partners for development. And I believe that once government partners them, then we are likely to even overcome issues of corruption. Corruption reductions will be our topmost priority. So I urge every Ghanaian, churches, instead of us building very big church auditoriums, let's use it to build factories as well. And so God is interested in the heart, not blocks and sand. And so I believe that even though where we need to worship is also important, it will not be much more important than the welfare of your own members.
Reverend Dr. Worlanyo Mensah, he is the Executive Director of Center for Greater Impact and for the in-depth analysis and education on the Ghanaian economy. Thank you so much for watching us. This is the news on Ghana News TV, and I'll see you again. My name is Derek Kwame Buchu. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.